Okay, this is an interview with Ben Brown, former state representative from Georgia. It's October 15th, 1996, and we're in his home at Renaissance Apartments and talking about his life in politics. But I'd like to talk first. I've tried to talk first about your upbringing, your parents. I know you know a fair amount about your grandparents. You know that they go back almost to the Civil War, to Reconstruction days. So maybe talk about your family first.
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Well, I was born in Montezuma, Georgia, November 14, 1939. My parents, General Lee Brown and Nettie Maud Mitchell, of course she became Brown when they were married, but they were, my father was born in Montezuma, Georgia. My mother was born in neighboring Pea Ridge, Georgia, which is in Peach County. I was born the fourth child of five eventually. And Montezuma is a small town. I think the population was like maybe 8,000 when I was born. It has not grown one iota since.
Near Perry.
Yes, near Perry,
Fort
near
Valley.
Plains,
Right.
Fort Valley, Cordele. It's really down in the heart of the Black Belt. My parents moved to Atlanta in 1941, 42. I was 3 years old, so I guess that means 42. We moved to College Park, Georgia, which is a little outpost from Atlanta. I grew up there, went to College Park Elementary School, where they say I was a good student. I don't know. They say I was a good student, exemplary student. But one thing I remember most about being in elementary school was that my peers had a lot of confidence in me. I was always the leader, the president, the organizer. And one of the highlights of that whole period was we used to have talent shows, and I choreographed. That's the word I learned later, but I didn't know what it was. I created a dance, and my dance won. And it was rather unusual for boys to be doing that. There were 6 girls or maybe 7 girls in the dance group, and 2 boys, myself and another fellow, and we won. That was very exciting. I was very active there in elementary school. My mother was very active with the PTA. So I felt like I was secure in my being as an individual.
What kind of work did your father do?
My father,
Montezuma and
yeah. Well, my father was going back to Montezuma, my father was a embalmer.
Okay.
He went to trade school in Savannah and got trained to be an embalmer. And he worked for a company there in Montezuma. And his motivation to move to the Atlanta area was to upgrade his skills and become associated with the Seller Brothers, which is one of the prominent funeral home services in the Atlanta area, in the state, really. But in coming, he discovered that there was work opportunities at the Railway Express, the railroad. And back in those days, in the 30s and 40s, that was a hell of a job for a black man. And of course, they called them Negroes at the time. So Daddy got a job at the Railway Express, and he put aside his embalming skills, and he retired from Railway Express after 35 years of employment.
What kind of job did he have?
Well, he was a freight handler.
Okay.
Just so freight handler. He was no more than my size, 5 feet 7.5, maybe 8. Never weighed more than 150 pounds in his whole 75 years of life.
Uh-huh.
My mother, to my knowledge, never worked until we were in College Park and all of the kids were in school. She began to do domestic work for the white lady, and she became a custodian at the school. We thought that was an upgrade. But she didn't work very much. Matter of fact, she was just a great homemaker. Died young. My mother died at 50 years old. And matter of fact, my mother died at 50 on the same day that my father died at 75. Yeah, same day, December 17th. That's quite a coincidence. But looking back in the childhood days, it was very exciting. I never felt pain for hunger or clothing or whatever. It was just a whole lot of comfort.
What kind of activities did your parents or organizations?
Well, my mother was active with the NAA. I mean, with the church and the PTA, and she was also active with a civic and professional or civic club. The ladies in College Park would get together and they would meet, and I don't know what they did at those meetings, but she would go. And that was the extent of that. My father worked all the time. I don't think he was part of anything other than the church. They tell me back in Montezuma, as a young man, he was very active as a lay leader in the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, better known as the CME Church. And
what was the home church in College Park?
Well, now that's the irony, and that's the ironic thing about it. There was no CME church in College Park, so my parents had to come to Atlanta proper to go to church, and they connected with the West Mitchell CME Church, which is near the Marsh Brown campus. But the children didn't make that journey. That was a journey then, right. 10 miles, 12 miles up the road on the trolley to get to church. So we went to the neighborhood church, which was a Methodist Episcopal church, now known as the United Methodist Church.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I joined the Methodist Episcopal Church when I was 8, 9 years old. And I was very active in Sunday school and church. And when I reached the age of 13, I began to play for the youth choir at Laster's Chapel Methodist Church in College Park, United Methodist now in College Park. We moved into the city proper in 1956. I was 16, 17 years old, somewhere along there, and we connected with my mother's church. So we were all together, finally, at West Mitchell CME. Yeah.
Why did they move to College Park first instead of into the city, just out of curiosity?
I don't know. I think it was a matter of expediency. I think because he had sisters and brothers living in Atlanta, and some of them were living in the housing projects, and I don't think he wanted to live in the housing projects back then. So he found him a little place to rent. It was a duplex, 3 rooms, shotgun. I mean, it was very, very menial. Well, we didn't know that because it was clean. We ate and outside toilets. I mean, the whole bit. We're talking about 1942.
Right.
So I grew up with that background, having to line the outdoor toilets, keep the magnets away.
We know a lot more about Atlanta, of course, than we know about the College Park Black community. So I'd just be kind of curious to know some. So, what were some of the institutions and organizations?
Well, College Park was a very unusual little town. It had a surprisingly high educated level of people, whereas my family had outside toilets. There was still a section of people who had been to college, had nice homes with inside facilities, and I lived on the up and coming of the working side. But then there were the teachers. We even had a doctor in College Park, a black doctor. So there were some models. The institutions that impacted our lives basically were the Civic Women's Club, there was the Boy Scout group. I never was a part of the Boy Scouts, but there was a YMCA. Butler Street of Atlanta had a branch in College Park, and that's where my mother really was very active. She was into that, and I lived 3 doors from it. So I got involved with that. That was my life. Every day when I got through playing with the boys and the girls and whatever, I would end up at that Y. So I ended up getting a job. My first job was at the Y, at the College Park extension of the Butler Street Y.
What was that?
Well, it was like about as big as this room. It was just about as big as this room. But we had programs. We had movies. That was a night for showing movies because we couldn't go to the theaters. So they would rent movies and show them to us, and it was just like a theater. All the kids would come and look at Superman and uh, gosh, what's the forerunner to Star Trek? Oh, we had outer space stuff. What is the name of that series?
Flash Gordon.
Flash Gordon. Flash Gordon. That, and I tell people now, I said, well, Star Trek is nothing but a remake of Flash Gordon. And then if they look at it closely and accept it, they will see that Star Trek is an evolution of Flash Gordon. And
So the Butler Street Y had satellites all
had
over.
satellites. Now, I don't know where they had other satellites, but they had one in College Park. And it was part of the program. My mother and some other ladies made sure that they kept it. And this was part of the wisdom and the insight of Warren R. Cochran. Mm-hmm.
Before we get to Mr. Cochran, what did your mother do concerning the Y?
Well, they always, I guess the main thing is that they had a board, I don't know whether they call it a board or advisory group or whatever, but she was on it. They kept raising the money, the membership campaigns, and we had to raise money to keep the doors open. And I got involved with the money raising very early as a youngster. I was the top producer as a youngster, and it gradually grew on and on and on.
In terms of like
raising money, we would have annual, however you did it, we had membership campaigns each year to raise the budget. And I participated in those as a kid and as an adult.
So, did you know Warren Cochran as a kid then before
Oh,
you were
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about Mr. Cochran.
Well, first, let's talk about John Cox.
Okay.
John Cox, and he is very unheralded. John was the director of the College Park Extension, and I thought he was an old man, but he was just a kid himself at the time. Maybe when I was 5 or 6, he was 18 or something like that. John Cox was like the extension of Mr. Warren Cochran. And John would organize us. We took trips, get on those buses, went to the libraries. And he exposed us. And then we met Mr. Cochran. We thought he was a white man. I mean, he was very fair. And I said, this is I didn't know what arrogant means, but as I look back now, he was really confident. He was a very articulate, very self-assured man. And I kind of liked him. I said, this man is something. Back in the back of your head, you challenge people, when you think they're sharp or something like that. I don't know what gave me the notion that I could challenge him. But I did. And I started to...
So you were talking about how you're going to challenge Mr. Cochran.
Well, I don't know what it was that. It was just that I liked the environment. I was, my focus was on what this man was talking about. And the message of the Y stuck with me. Spirit, mind, and body. They got that in. I don't know how they got it in, but they got it in. And that's what my life is built on. People. And I started working for the Y.
When you were like
8 years, before then.
Okay.
8 years old, I was working for the Y. 9, 10, I was cleaning up. That was my job. I was a janitor at the extension. And by the time I reached 12 or 13, they made me a junior counselor at John Hope Camp in Fort Valley. And of course, that was just my own life at the time. You get into something and you get into it. And then Butler Street opened up a camp in 1954 at Lake Allatoona. It was a branch out because John Hope was a state I don't think it was private, but I think it was state-owned for the blacks. So we developed our own camp up in Allatoona, and I was one of the first junior counselors there. And by the time I reached 17, they made me a senior counselor. I had my own group. I was in charge. Um,
Let's flesh that out a bit, because that's an aspect of Georgia's history that not too many people know about, the Black Y camps.
Oh yeah, we used to. I don't know exactly what year that they started taking groups of kids from Atlanta to Fort Valley to John Hope Camp.
So it was on the campus, or was it?
No, it was out in the country. It was a beautiful campsite, lake, and the whole campsite. I mean, just fine. Georgia's gotten very sophisticated today, though, in its state facilities, in terms of camp, lodges and cabins, what have you. I went for the first time at 8 years old. And I remember Don Clendenin was there, Vernon Jordan was there, John Cox, of course, was a counselor. My brother, who he could probably tell you more about when he comes in here, was there.
What was his name?
Clarence Brown. He's older than I. He's 6 years older. But he had gone before I went. And there are just so many people who came that way. Walt Frazier, the basketball player, you name them. Nipsey Russell, the comedian. They all came basically out of this neighborhood, Buttermilk Bottom. This is Buttermilk Bottom, where we sit today. And it was well organized. We would take hikes, the usual routine of a camp. And I'll have more to say about that later, because that movement has died out as relates to the black community as I see it. But we did have those camps, and we had to pay for them. I don't remember nobody getting no check to sponsor us.
Mm-hmm. So what's interesting is that so many people who came out of the Y later went on. So you knew Vernon Jordan as a boy, and you knew Don Clendenin as a boy.
Yeah, they were older, but I knew. And Martin King. Martin King went to John Hope. But Martin King was a part of the Butler Street legacy. Someone told me that there is a picture that was taken at a youth meeting in East Point, Georgia, that has Martin Luther King, Vernon Jordan, Maynard Jackson, Ben Brown, J.D. Hudson. I mean, now they were the big boys, and I was a little boy.
And Maynard would have been closer in age to you.
To me, closer, in between.
Right.
He's about a year or so older than I.
Right, so you knew him as a little boy.
Well,
not so little boy.
They were running around the Y. Now, I don't know where Julian was. Julian wasn't even here. He was in Fort Valley or Pennsylvania, one of them places. He was not in that mix.
Well, in addition to the activities, as important as they are, what about sort of the message of the Y, or what we
the message
was role models?
Well, they taught us how to respect each other, and they also taught us we call it role modeling now, but we would actually have meetings to show us how to conduct a meeting. I learned how to conduct a meeting at the Y from Robert's Rules of Order. I mean, basic things like that. And all of it evolved out of that little triangle, spirit, mind, and body. And we would have devotion every morning and every evening. Sunday we would have Vesper. That's where I learned the word Vesper. We would have Vesper down by the lake. And there was a person by the name of J.D. Winston, who was the quarter. J.D. Winston.
Okay.
We used to call him Bro Wayne. Bro Wayne touched the lives of at least 4 generations of kids. I mean, the man is ageless. He's incapacitated now, but he's still living. And but Mr. Winston was obviously had been trained in camping and boys' work. Mm-hmm. And he would have programs. He had a message on the wall that says, and I never will forget this if I get it right. Oh God, help me to be a winner. if I should not win, help me to be a great loser. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing,
right,
but
right.
that message stood over the door at the Butler Street Y building, boys department. Oh, great spirit, help me to win. If I should not win, help me to be a great loser. I think that's it, something like that. That stuck with me.
Of course, late in the 40s, at the main branch, there was the Hungry Club, and that was where the first black police officers had their precinct. So I'm kind of curious what kind of messages about how to survive and how to make it in a segregated world.
Well, we didn't think about having to make it. We just accepted it. As a kid, I mean, oh, black policemen. So you accepted that. You didn't question why they were at the Y. I mean, not at that point. I'd be lying if I said that. I mean, you saw these black men coming out there looking good in those uniforms, and you thought something was happening. I mean, it was important to have policemen there. But that was the work of Warren Cochran. Warren convinced Williams Hartsfield to do that. And the community was proud. And I guess, I mean, I can't say that we questioned the separate thing at that point. We were just proud that it was there.
And you had your world.
And we had our world. We were in our world.
He was also involved in some of the early voter registration efforts in the 40s.
Yeah.
After the war. And, is there any message about politics or any message about citizenship?
I observed that as a youngster too. Because I would sneak in on the meetings. See, there was a whole group of them. Warren Cochran was sort of like the secretary. I mean, everything in this town politically evolved around Butler Street Y. I mean, the white side and the black side. But there was a whole cadre of people. C.R. Yates, who was the treasurer of everything. He and Mr. L.D. Milton, they had the Yates and Milton drugstore. Mr. Milton had the bank. You had A.T. Walden, who was a very fascinating man. He was the lawyer. A.T. Walden. And then you had Chief Akins, who was a real politician. He had linkages with Harry Truman. And they sort of represented then what the Jesse Hills and the Herman Russells represent today. But A.T. Walden, boy, he was a giant. I mean, he was the first black in this state to practice law for a living. And I used to see them do those things. Then there was John H. Calhoun, who was a Republican. And he was proud of being a Lincoln Republican. C.A. Scott, the publisher of the paper. And as time moved on, they got real cranky. But they started the Negro Voters League. You had Republicans and Democrats. And they would put out them tickets and people would follow them. I mean, they would follow the tickets. When I said tickets, they would put out endorsements. And I got in on that early. I was passing out endorsements.
Meaning, like as
a kid.
As a
yeah.
young teenager.
As a teenager, yeah. I said, oh, this is interesting.
And you got into it more or less through the Y connection?
Through the Y. My whole political life evolved out of that Y. Because that's where I met people. And mind you now, I'm coming from College Park at this period. This is Atlanta.
Right.
So I'm looking at a whole different context from where I live.
So a real eye-opener or something.
Yeah, it was expansive. So
you would come in like on the streetcar to take part in things?
To do things at that Y. And by the time I was 17, 18, Warren gave me a job at Summerhill branch. We had a branch at Summerhill.
Okay.
Right there, I saw that whole community was taken down and built a stadium.
Right.
I saw all of that. And Summerhill was just as rough then as it is rougher,
right, because
there were more people.
Right.
And here I am, a little frail thing out there talking about being the director of that branch. And I was. So I would come in on the bus. Now, mind you, we had moved to Atlanta, so I didn't have to make the whole journey but 1 year. And then I would be going across town.
And you had moved to where in Atlanta?
Napoleon Drive on the west side, what they call the Fair Hill community. But The why was very stimulating to me, and still is. I just can't find an angle to get back in there. The leadership is so locked in now, they don't reach out for new people.
Well, again, I think, the point that you're making, the why was at the center of all sorts of things going on at that time. Something that, again, folks maybe don't quite realize.
Well, it was. I realized why it was like that then, because our community was so restricted in what we could do. We didn't have proper recreational facilities, and the only place you could go was the Y. But over the years, the public sector has expanded that. We got this is a black town. We control all those things now, so therefore Butler Street does not get the prominence that it had in a segregated society. And it's just one of the, I don't want to say one of the negatives, but it's one of the fallouts of integration. It's really definitely one of them. And it's not I don't think it's a good fallout, because what we lost in all of that was the importance of appreciating our own institutions. We thought because of integration that we needed to just let our institutions be abandoned and enrich those of the majority group, which was the worst thinking that we could have ever come up with.
Nobody knew it at that time necessarily.
Well, I did. I knew it was happening. And I used to try to make a distinction between desegregation and integration. And they would look at me funny. And I would say, this is as a student at Clark College, I would say, our goal is to desegregate the society, to allow us to develop on equal playing field whatever we want to develop. Not to surrender our institutions, which we did, but to assure ourselves of the opportunity to start the race at the same place. And of course, that was faulty thinking, because how could you start the damn race at the same place when the race is already going on? So, it's a lot of contradictory philosophy and emotions. But I still say today that desegregation is the goal. Integration can come as a result of desegregation, if it is going to be. But, and I know I'm jumping ahead. I done got up to 50 years old already. But anyway, the learning that I had back in those early days through that Butler Street YMCA gave me a perspective on life that I've tried to live throughout.
That's real important.
Mm-hmm.
Let's shift to the parallel influence. Your ninth grade teacher, Harriet Moore.
Harriet Mitchell Murphy. No, Harriet Mitchell Moore Murphy.
Harriet Mitchell Moore Murphy. Okay.
Harriet Mitchell was one of the prettiest ladies I've ever seen. She was a bachelorette when she came to South Fulton High School. And she taught me my civics. And she was fascinated because of my inquiries and my prying into her knowledge of politics. I remember, prior to going to her class, all the hoopla about Harry Truman and Dewey. All I remember is that I told my mother to vote for Harry Truman. Now why? I don't know. I think it was because he played the piano. I really do. And I didn't know nothing about Dewey. I think he was from New York, and I didn't like New Yorkers at the time. I was a born and bred Southerner. And that was kid stuff. So, Harriet, she stimulated my interest. I mean, she knew I could do it, so she pulled to work on me. My first biography for her was Harry S. Truman. And I learned so much about him. And then I started reading about Roosevelt. Didn't know that Harry was really the product of him. But that's the way that went.
So you got interested in political biographies.
Yeah. Oh, that's all I read during that time. I was a pretty good student, they tell me, overall. But I'll be honest with you, my reading was restricted. My reading was, and still is. I find it very difficult to read novels, just plain old novels. But you give me a documentary or advising consent kind of thing, or Ralph Ellison, Invisible Man kind of thing. And those are in betweens, but they have a message that is so real that I can relate to. And I've followed politics since 1948. I was 9 years old.
Okay, what about politics in the 50s, the Voters League? And I'm just trying to get other sort of influences on you as a teenager.
Well, the Voters League, no question about it, the Atlanta, what they call it, the Atlanta Voters League.
Atlanta Negro Voters League.
Yeah, Atlanta Negro. Oh, it had a great impact on me. Oh, great impact. So I said, these guys got nothing, they deal it. I mean, they control, these are the leaders. This is what the leaders about.
What are some of your,
And then 52, let me share this with you.
Okay.
Richard Nixon was running Mr. Eisenhower as his vice president. He came to Atlanta. This was 56, though, not 52. 56. Okay. He came to Atlanta.
You're just talking about Nixon coming to Atlanta in the 50s.
Yeah. There was a guy in town, C. Clayton Powell.
C. what? Clayton
C.
Powell.
Clayton Powell, Republican. Been that way forever. He rounded up a group of youngsters. I guess we were all still in high school or early college. No, I guess not. 56, I was not in college.
You were just at the end of
high school,
I guess, yeah.
And we on a bus waving the flag, welcoming the Vice President of the United States to Atlanta. And I enjoyed it. I had a chance to meet Nixon and what have you. But I wasn't swayed by that. Because, that was just an activity. And I thought that was cute.
To meet the Vice President.
To meet the Vice President of the United States.
Mm-hmm. Well, what are some of your childhood memories of folks like Walden?
Well, I guess Mr. Walden influenced me because I went to law school. I wanted to go to the University of Georgia Law School, but Mr. Walden and those were working on the Charlene Hunter Hamilton Holmes case. And they suggested that I go on up to Howard. And so the state of Georgia paid my way to Howard, the grant and aid program. I didn't have to pay a dime to go get my law degree.
Were you aware of the Horace Ward case as a kid when he tried to get into the University of Georgia Law School?
Not as a kid.
Not as a kid.
But I met, Horace became my mentor and peer all at the same time. Because he was a junior attorney on that University of Georgia case when I was getting ready to go to law school.
Right.
So I'm sure Mr. Walton's presence impacted on me greatly.
What about, what kind of man was Calhoun from your childhood?
John Calhoun was great. He was an organizer. This man can organize. See, the black community voted for Nixon in 1960. I mean, because of John F. Calhoun. John organized. I said, this man is tough. So I observed him and learned some things from him.
What about Dobbs? I mean, he
John
was
Wesley
getting older
Dobbs.
by that time.
John Wesley Dobbs was just like spirit. I mean, the Masonic thing. I was not in the Masonic thing, but he was like the Kennedys. He had trained his daughters. He had given them a creed, and they all lived by it. So that was like a family. That was a black family royalty in Atlanta. They didn't have a whole lot of money, but this man had education, and he was a model, But I wasn't close to that at all.
Okay.
But I recognized it, I saw it, and I admired it.
What about, again, childhood memories, teenager memories of people like Borders or...
Now, Reverend Borders and I were friends. I mean, I just admired him. Anybody who could sit up there and orate like he did. And then as I got older and he got older, I would go and sit with him. To give you an example, now when I ran for office in 65, I was 25 years old. And Mr. Reverend Borders had been putting out that he was going to run. I went to Reverend Borders, sat down there and looked him straight in the face. I said, Reverend Borders, you don't need to be running for that. I didn't say you're too old. I didn't say that. I said, I'm trying to launch a career, and I'm prepared to do this, and I would welcome your support. The last thing I want to do is run against you. And he looked at me, he said, you got the nerve to tell me that, Thor? And smiled. And he said, you're right. That's all I needed. Because I knew I had his blessings, I had his spiritual protection. And, but we used to talk. I would sit at his foot and just talk, and, he liked me. Daddy King, too. I went to Daddy King. Daddy King wasn't thinking about running, about nothing like that. And he said, Daddy King said, boy, you remind me of my son. Talking about Martin. And I was flattered by that, because Martin had made his mark by this. Yeah, he was there by this. Right. And we used to relate. We would go out to his house. His mother, Martin's mother, liked by the time I was married, and he liked us. And they gave me a lot of warmth, a lot of comfort. And Warren did too. Mm-hmm. Warren Cochran. Yeah, those were the pillars. Reverend Borders, Daddy King, and they gave me license to do a lot of things. Far more, and I can't say this to can you turn that off a minute?
Okay. Where were we talking about? You were in this network of people. Were you it sounds like they were cultivating you to be a leader and to sort of be the next
I'm
generation.
not sure there was any concentrated effort on their parts. But I guess I have to look back and say they recognized something and they undergirded me.
But also these institutions were where leadership would be forged and kind of developed and so forth. The Y, Washington High School,
I didn't go to Washington High School. I went to South Fulton in East Point. But Washington High is certainly one of those institutions. And so was David T. Howard.
Right.
That's where Vernon went.
Right. So did you know kids? You must have, of course, through the Y connections, known kids who went to these other schools too.
Oh, yeah. We had a radio program, WERD Radio, 860 on your dial, the first black-owned radio station in the continental United States, owned by J.B. Blayton. Somehow I got into that. I was a member. I did a couple of performances on the WERD Radio Theater, reading. And then we had a teen panel every Saturday morning where you had representatives from all the high schools. And I was a representative from South Fulton. I got a chance to meet people from Washington, from Turner, from Howard, from Price. And now I was 17, 18 years old at that time. Right. That's before college.
Right. Well, that's an institution that people don't really talk about too much, WERD.
Oh, it was major. It was absolutely major. We had a radio station, and I listened to it.
What was the programming?
Well, it was, like I said, it had a theater on Sundays. They had a teen panel on Saturdays, gospel, blues.
It did have blues. Okay.
Oh, yeah, it was just black. It was black. It was reflective of the black culture of the time. And they would have a job mark, we'll talk about jobs. Oh, it was well balanced at the time. Mm-hmm. I think it would behoove you to just go try. I doubt they got tapes and stuff. I bet they let all that stuff go.
Yeah, I don't know of any,
I bet they let all that, but it was fantastic. Now, James Allipat is somebody you please talk to, because they used to play a major role in the political thing.
And how would that be?
Well, they would talk about the Atlanta Voters League. They would have time on there, and they endorsed candidates, and depending on who the MC was or the announcer.
Does Allipat go back to the 50s then?
Oh, he was the original, one of the original people at WRD. It would be worth your while to talk to him about the role that the WRD played in the political evolution of blacks in Atlanta. Be very fun.
What about events going on elsewhere in the country during the mid-50s? And I'm sort of talking from Brown to Montgomery to Little Rock, to what is going on in Africa, etc. What kinds of things influenced you as a teenager? You know, in
Cry
that
My
little-
Beloved Country. I was there when I got to Clark College in 1958. There was no YMCA chapter on the campus, so I organized the YMCA chapter. As a result of that, there was a quadrennial youth meeting of the YMCA at Champaign, at the University of Illinois, at Champaign-Urbana, and I was selected to go as organizer. It was my first international meeting. They did a presentation of Cry My Beloved Country.
by Alan Payton.
Yeah. And that's how I got into the apartheid issue. I was 17 years old. Ooh, 18 years old.
57, 58.
Yeah, that's almost 40 years ago. So that really got me out there on that issue, thinking and reading and observing what was going on in South Africa. As other parts of the world, we were, the independence movement was just beginning, basically, Nigeria, Ghana in particular, because of Nkrumah,
Right.
Azikiwe, and in Kenyatta over in Kenya. I started looking at that stuff.
In college or in high school? Or
This was in college.
In college,
This
okay.
is college. And Ghana, Nkrumah was important to me because he was a fraternity brother of mine. He had made the fraternity at Lincoln University.
Which fraternity?
Where he went Phi Beta Sigma.
Okay.
We don't say that too loud right now because of what's going on at the University of Georgia. But anyway, that's my fraternity, and
And he was a fraternity brother. Okay.
he was a fraternity
Okay.
brother, and I was influenced by that. New York was interesting to me because I began to learn about Tammany Hall.
When studying about New York, or did
This
you?
wasn't no study. This just my curiosity.
Right.
I learned about Jones, the Silver Fox. They talked about all this is stuff that I just picked up because I used to go to New York, go to New Jersey. Family was there.
Okay.
We get those free passes on the train,
Right.
and we would go up, and I couldn't help but pick up the drift.
Right.
And
Were
here,
those uncles or aunts or?
aunts. We'll get into all that.
Okay.
But there was a guy named Hewlin Jack, who was the president of Manhattan Borough, the first black president of Manhattan. So I was fascinated by that. He was a fraternity brother. See, the fraternity influenced me a lot. And then I began to learn about people like, what's that man's name? Ray Jones was the boss. He was the boss. Then that whole Harlem thing, Percy's son,
Right.
Basil Patterson, these are all latecomers.
Right.
And I followed them all the way on up to the current
What about
congressman.
Benjamin Davis.
Now, I read about Benjamin Davis, the communist, they called him, quote. He was a native Georgian.
Right, and from Atlanta.
He was from Atlanta. He was a lawyer, and he left the battle. I went to New York, took on the world battle. But Ben Davis, so I didn't quite understand his leaving the challenge, and I've been criticized by some of my peers for saying that the real battle was here in the South, and those who ran took on easier challenges. I said that in the New Republic during the Carter years, and I got criticized a little about that. But Ben Davis took on a bigger challenge, and I guess he had the privilege to do that. He and Paul Robeson were coming along at the same time. And there was no reason why we shouldn't be on the international stage.
No, I just was wondering in terms of the fact that he had Georgia roots in Atlanta.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm certainly familiar with him, and I studied him, but he was not he didn't fit as prominently in my psyche
As Hewlin Jack
as Hewlin Jack, the guys who were playing the real game, and and later Percy became really my hero.
I just want to get into a second what you mean when you say the real game.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
Well, the real game to me is you can work on the poles, POLE.
Right.
I mean, you can work on the extremes. Somebody has to work on the extreme to create a ground for me. And the real game is what I find in the middle, when you are talking about actual having some authority to impact on, having power rather, to impact on rules and regulations that governs the lives of people. That's the real game to me. I don't criticize those who create the extreme postures. I don't criticize the Farrakhan's or the Jesse Jacksons today. Because if they weren't out there, then there would be no room for Ben Brown to do what he has to do.
Right.
So we need it all. But the real game is when you sit in the chamber and you make the laws or you challenge the laws and you come out with something that's resolved, a resolution to deal with problems that people face. That's the real game to me. Now, yeah, I can go.
And you saw people like Hewlin Jack and Percy Sutton and
doing
others
that.
Doing that.
And then there was this guy from Chicago, Dawson.
Mm-hmm.
This man is phenomenal. I mean, he was quiet. He got elected. People talked about he was a handkerchief head. But look, that man wrote most of the postal regulations that runs this country today. And look at Adam Clayton Powell. Adam was all of it. I mean, he transcended all of the delineations I'm trying to make.
Right.
And that was the other one that I really admired. He went foolish at the end. But this son of a bitch, this guy, this guy, I mean, he had the deal. He wrote the health and welfare system of this country that we're still trying to modify. Adam Clayton Powell. And people don't realize how powerful you are when you're in the deal. Now, you can sit on the outside, you can fuss, and you can fight. For an example, in Atlanta, for years, we had all of our elections were at large for city council, city alderman. As a legislator, Grace Hamilton and I proposed a rewrite of the charter.
Right.
Of course, I didn't get no credit for none of that, but
she
and I both, well, she was sponsor and I was co-sponsor of the committee.
Charter revision committee.
Yeah, and we had to argue with our friends in Atlanta about having a mixed system of at-large and single district. Because the only way we were going to get on the council at that time was to have single-member districts. And Julian served on that committee, too. I guess he was a co-sponsor of it, but Grace and I drove it. We drove that, and we got it rewritten. If it had been left up to me, I would have had them all on district basis. That's where you get the truest base of representation. Mm-hmm. And there's arguments to be made on either side.
We'll get back to that one, as we go along. I will talk about Grace Hamilton, her role in the delegation and so forth.
Fantastic.
What about, what impact would you say the Brown decision, the Montgomery boycott, events in Little Rock had on you as a young man?
Well, I saw the world opening up for us. Brown decision in '54, I was still in high school, so I had limited understanding of what was going on, although I knew that it was a pace-setting, landmark, as they call them, case, because it was turning around an old philosophy that the Supreme Court and this country had operated on. I began to write papers about it. It looked like to me I did a piece on that. In the Little Rock thing, I said, oh, isn't this wonderful? As I walked down the aisle of a segregated high school. And back to my mind was, you think we're going to have to do this in Atlanta?
Trying to get a sense of the mood folks who graduated from high school in the late 50s, you know,
Well,
their world, and, you know.
well, our world was basically we had come up in it, and we're gonna see what we can do to move on to the next piece, next level. But we were very clear that the world was out there open to us, and my classmates were very clear on that. For some reason, they knew that I was gonna have a part to play. So in the class prophecy, they called me Senator Brown. This is high school. So they saw me better. Well, I knew I was too, but I didn't know anybody else saw it.
Graduated from high school 58,
57.
57, and go to Clark. And let's talk a little bit about the people, the atmosphere at Clark, you know, and more generally at the AU Center, but at Clark in particular.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think Clark gets overshadowed by Morehouse and Spelman. So.
Well, at that time it did. I think all that's changed now, but yeah, going into Clark, it was just exciting. I mean, I knew I was going to college.
Were you the first in the family to go to college?
No. My oldest brother went to Clark. My second brother went to Clark. My sister and I started Clark at the same time.
Okay.
So that was precedence. I was the only one to finish.
Okay.
And the only one to go to graduate school. But anyway, going to Clark was, hell, I was excited. Meeting all these people from all these different little towns. And I did not live on campus, but you wouldn't have known it because I was there all the time.
Right.
Like I say, the YMCA experience even impacted on me there because before I went to Urbana, we had a regional YMCA meeting at Clark, which gave me my first real peer-integrated experience. When I knew that I was on par with anybody, regardless of the color. That happened as a freshman at Clark, Atlanta.
Describe that, because I've heard other people talk
Yeah,
about
well,
those
it
types
was
of experiences.
yeah. The Southeastern Regional YMCA had a meeting. They were working on the thing, I guess, at the time, and they brought it to CAU. So there were black and white college students sitting up in a room as peers. And that was nice. So I had several of those. And then the culminating thing was really going to the University of Illinois. So
let me just backtrack a bit. I mean, you've described a world where you're very confident in yourself, where you've been nurtured. You know, you're sure of who you are, and still being in an integrated setting had an impact on you in a certain way too.
Sure, it was different. It was different. I have a lot more to say about that as we move up the line on this conversation.
Okay, great.
MIT and other places.
Right. Okay.
World travel.
Right,
stuff.
right,
We
right,
can
right,
talk about that.
Okay.
But as a college student, I couldn't understand why we had 6 schools of higher learning in the Atlanta University Center. So through my little political efforts, I began to talk to the other schools. And let me back up. As freshmen, we had a very political-oriented class. Very political. We got together and decided we were going to take over the student body politics as sophomores, which is unheard of. And we did. We sat down, we organized, and we said, our sophomore year, we sat down and organized. I said, now you're going to be president of the student body, James Felton. I'm going to be vice president. Lydia Tucker, the woman I married, was going to be secretary. And we pulled it off. So as juniors, we controlled the school, politics.
When normally it had been seniors.
Seniors. So when we started a little dynasty, because the next year, I became president as a senior. And we brought up, my vice president was a junior.
Okay.
And we just brought it on. We kept that going for 5 years. 2 years after I was gone, my group.
Okay. Tell me a bit about Felder.
James Felder was a fascinating young man from South Carolina. James was a leader, good person, graduated and was distinguished by being captain of the team that carried President Kennedy's body. James came back, got elected to the South Carolina legislature, served one term, got defeated in that swamp when Nixon and them came in with that wave. And Jim's life turned. I don't know what happened. He has been in trouble since. And we all been trying to figure out what happened. You know, just all sorts of things that are totally unrepresentative of what we knew when we were in college. He played a very important part in organizing of the sit-in movement. He was the president of the student body, so his name is on the document, as you're saying, an appeal for human rights.
Right.
That's about all I can say.
What about Lydia's background?
Lydia Tucker. Lydia was from a well-to-do black family. Mother was a nurse.
From where?
Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah. Washington High.
Okay.
Well-to-do family. Her father was a musician, played bass, and worked at one of these hotels that no longer exists. He was a
like
doorman. Yeah, no, I wasn't Henry Grady. It was the old Ansley Hotel, which was the major hotel downtown.
Right.
Became the Ansley Hotel, and he was a musician, had a band, had a Packard, a car to show you how. I mean, who had a Packard but the rich?
Right. Okay.
And had their own home. And Lydia was a well-groomed lady, but there was a spiritual breakdown in that family somewhere. The sisters and the brothers and they just never got along or something. I don't know. It was wild. I don't think the mother really ever approved of me. Well, let me back up.
Okay.
Lydia was a friend of my sister's. And you know, as freshmen, sex don't mean nothing. You just have a group of people that you kind of cling with. My sister and Lydia and several others. And, you know, you find out then that you got a zipper on your pants and you start getting interested in girls seriously. So I got interested in her. I said, this lady make a good mother for me, for my children. And I got interested in her, and she wanted to get married earlier than I did. And I told her if she wait for me, we'll do that. I wanted to finish law school, get that out the way. And when I did, I called her. I had not talked to her in a year. I called her and said, I'm ready to get married. Are you? She was in Detroit, and I didn't have any idea what she was doing and what. And I just picked up the phone and called. I said, let's get married. And she said, okay. That was June of 1966. So we got married, gave birth to 2 fine sons, and they are doing very well. We'll talk about them too.
Okay, sure.
But something went wrong. I guess I was moving a little fast, and that's the only way I interpreted it, of course. I don't want to shed any negative light on her.
Right.
But the public thing seems to have been working. So when we went to Washington, it just completely fell apart. Just couldn't. She never got there spiritually. Did not see where we were and what it required of a wife. That's what happened, really.
I was, more interested in a sense of sort of the background of the folks who were involved in politics and in this group at Clark too.
Yeah, all of that. And if you don't find your place, if you don't sense your place when you're trying to run a country, how many people can understand and envision having an important part to play in the running of a country? How many people can do that? You got to, you just got to be driven. And I guess she wasn't driven. I know she wasn't driven like I was, but I thought she had a comfortable footing. But she cried the whole time we were there. And then she decided she was going to leave, and she left. Of course, in those kind of things, you find all sorts of reasons to justify your actions. So I don't know what those are, because I refuse to get into any kind of battle about it. I said, okay, you go on, do what you got to do. because I was determined not to haul my children into a courtroom and all that foolishness. That somebody has to give in, and I pretty much did, just for the salvation of my children and her. You know. So sad thing. I could be married today. I could be married to that lady today, but I can't marry myself. Yeah, you have to meet minds. Minds have to meet. And if they don't meet, then you don't have no marriage. She lost respect for me for some reason. And when you lose respect for your partner, you ain't no marriage. Well, you know, she was saying. But anyway, that's...
Let's go back to
let's
50
get back
or
to
59, 60, okay.
That's the marriage. You got that.
Okay, so you all got involved in politics,
Mm-hmm.
and you took over the student government at the end of your sophomore, beginning of junior year. And it's you and Felder and Lydia.
And
who else is in this sort of same crowd?
Danny Mitchell was the young. Danny was the young fellow behind me, but he was involved there, and we just had carte blanche, man. I mean, we had carte blanche. This is the most precious piece. This is just part of them. I got boxes of those things.
Okay.
But that's the most precious piece, which acknowledges the point that you're making.
This says a plaque saying to Benjamin Daniel Brown, a recognition of responsible and creative leadership at Clark College and in the Atlanta community, 1957 to 61, from the faculty and staff of Clark College, June 61, when he graduated.
They'd never done that before. I was not salutatorian or valedictorian or any of that, which are the people who get honors at the graduation commencement. They gave me a special recognition at the commencement exercise. First time they'd ever done that in the history of the school. And this plaque was given to me. Now that was encouragement. That was recognition of the hard work. And I mean, it wasn't something I was working toward. It was something that just I did. It just was coming.
Let me ask you, so you're working still at the Y and organized a Clark chapter and so forth, and going to Urbana, Champaign, and you're active in the student government. What about involvement with folks like Carl Holman and his group?
Oh, yes. Lord, him was ACA, Atlanta Committee for Cooperative Action. Jesse Hill, Carl Holman, Whitney Young, Clinton Warner, Albert Davis. Doctors. Albert Davis, Dr. Clinton Warner. I mentioned Carl Holman. Vernon, I think, was a part of that group, too. He was the baby in the group. But those guys were hands-on. I mean, I took courses from Carl Holman. C. Eric Lincoln was there, too, at the time, but I never took a course from C. Eric, but I was a friend of his. That's how I met Malcolm X. When C. Eric when he was writing the book Black Muslim in America, that book generated right on C. at Clark's campus. ACTA was like they were like in their mid-30s or late 30s or early 40s, and they were the leaders. I mean, they were the new guard coming in from the Borders and the Aikens and the Waltons and the Cochrans. They were the new guard. A group of people whom we had created as students. We set the stage for the change of the guard. And I think every time there's a change of the guard, there's a group of people who set the stage for that. We created the friction that caused that change to take place. And Carl Holman was really like the sponsor. And then there was Howard Zinn at Spelman, Bob Baycoat, Brisbane at Morehouse.
Right.
Lois Moreland at Spelman.
Right.
And then there were community people who fitted in that same piece, like Ruth Sturtevant, NAACP group, Johnny Yancey, Eunice Cooper, Lottie Watkins. All of those are names of people who rallied. Donald Hollowell, and folk like that. Q.V. Williamson. I could go down a litany of names of people, probably miss some, who joined in and gave us the, that undergirding. People would call me and say, because I don't know why I was always out front on this stuff. I was never the leader during that time. I was not the number one leader. That was Lonnie King. The students tried to make me that, but I wouldn't let them do that.
So we'll get to that in a minute. Okay.
All right, you've heard about
I want to get to that one.
Yeah. But anyway, let me stop on that. I think I gave you what's wrong.
Well, okay, I'm talking about what kind of connection did you have before the appeal with the Carl Holmans and the Whitney Youngs and the Dr. Davis and the community people and so forth, and the evolution of ACCA and a second look, is that what it's called?
Second look. Well, Carl Holman, like I said, was my humanities teacher. Alva Davis was prominent with the NAACP, and I was youth member, active. Whitney Young, I admired him because of the School of Social Work. I was looking at that as a possibility for my graduate work. Didn't know Clinton David. Clinton won at the time. Johnny Yance, Mother Sturtevant went to my church, so I knew her. So that was about the extent of it. Nothing major.
But you knew of the publication, A Second Look, or?
Well, that came out, and then I took a real look at what they were doing, because they gave us a script.
Well, what were they doing?
Well, they were sitting around assessing what the ills were of the community, just as we were, but they were in a much more responsible position. So we took that look, we looked at that stuff, and we said, oh, well, this is what we're up here protesting about. And that's how the appeal came out. Well, the president's, of course, his activity had started in Durham, Greensboro,
in February.
Greensboro. And the presidents were frightened that we might do something like that. Now, I don't know how Julia and them tell this story, but I know that the president said, we hope y'all will present your case before you start acting a fool. That's basically what they said. People don't understand what you're doing if you just go out there and protesting, and they want to know what you're protesting for. So the suggestion really came from the president.
Well, let's talk about the mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
Greensboro happens early February.
February 1, 1960.
Mm-hmm. Then?
The news spread all over the country, right? Then we began to... Lonnie King called me down one morning and said, Ben, you see what the students are doing in Greensboro? Then next time I know, I'm sitting at the table with Julian and Lonnie, Morris Dillard.
Herschel?
I don't remember Herschel being at that table. We went to Herschel.
And she was?
She was at Spelman. The girls didn't hang out down at the corner.
Okay. Oh, this is on the...
Yates and Milton.
On the west end, Yates and Milton.
Yates and Milton,
right.
Which no longer exists.
Right. The one on Hunter Street.
No.
The one on
Auburn. Fair Street.
On Fair Street, okay.
It doesn't exist anymore. Matter of fact, the CAU Student Center is being built there.
Mm-hmm.
This was on Fair Street.
Okay.
And what I said to Lonnie wanted to be just Clark and Morehouse at the time. That's what I got. I might be misinterpreting, but that's what I got. Well, I said, to make it real, we need to involve everybody. Morris Brown, Spelman, everybody. And if I recall correctly, we set out on our mission to make contact. I was to make contact with Morris Brown people, which I did. We got ITC, and I don't know who actually did all that stuff, but all I know is that we came together.
How had you known Lonnie anyway?
Well, I knew Lonnie through the Y, Butler Street. Yeah, I missed him, and Lonnie King grew up in the Butler Street Y, just like I did, but he was a little older than I. He went to the Navy and came back, and he came back to school and found me in school. So he's a little older than I am, and
but you were both Y boys.
We were both Warren Cochran boys. And he knew, we knew each other very well. So he knew he had a friend. And then we...
So this first meeting is Lonnie, is it actually a meeting or is it just
No,
a drugstore?
my meeting, my first, I don't know, everybody has their first. I mean, I've heard so many stories about this. So
Well, we're talking about you.
I'm talking about me.
Right.
I met with Lonnie at the Yates and Mills one morning alone. And then the second meeting was with Julia and Morris, I think. But
Dillard.
yeah, but Lonnie came up with the idea that we ought to do something. And I said, you're right. And we went from there. Now, how we got, I said, my thinking was that the leadership of the movement ought to be the student leaders, chosen leaders, of which Lonnie was not.
Right, okay.
But it didn't exclude him because he was the organizer. I mean, he was the pivot. And that's how we pulled in the president and vice presidents of all the colleges. So I was vice president at the time.
Right, and Felder was president, right?
Yeah.
So then you're saying you got a council of all the student government presidents from all the different colleges. And who was from Morris Brown, do you recall?
Marianne Smith, and who's the doctor now, I'm going to give you her number, and a fellow named Hicks. Okay. William Hicks. I don't know where he is.
And Clark was?
James Felder and Ben Brown.
Well, now was Carolyn Long there?
Carolyn came much later.
Yeah, okay. Then,
I don't know what her story is, but she came later.
Spellman was?
Herschel and Marion Wright, Elderman.
Right.
And ITC was James Mays and Willie Mays and maybe Johnny Mack.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay.
But it certainly was Willie Mays.
And then Morehouse was?
What was it? Dr. Tall Boy.
Sorry.
I can't think of it, but it's on there.
Okay.
But Lonnie was just superseding to that.
Right.
He didn't have a constituency.
And anybody from Atlanta University?
Yeah, I said that. Johnny Mack and Johnny Parham.
Johnny Parham, okay. From AU.
Yeah, and Willie Mays was from ITC.
Okay. So y'all got in a meeting together, and then what?
Somehow, well, I don't mean to be boosting Ben Brown, but my theory was that we needed to talk to the college presidents. I said, we can't do this in isolation of the college presidents. We need to let them know what we are doing. And out of that conversation came the suggestion that we all state our case. So out of that came the appeal for human rights.
Okay, so you met in a room with
we met
Clement
all of them, Brawley, all of them. I'm not sure all of them were in attendance, but they were all invited. I'm sure they were, though.
And the message very clearly was?
Yeah, we don't. If you're going to do something, do it with dignity. That was the whole message.
Is this like an appeal to a certain kind of Atlanta?
Oh, yeah, that was part of Atlanta. That was Atlanta, sophistication. Okay, you're going to tear up the town, let's tear it up in decency. That was basically the message. So we felt kind of proud of that. We came up with the document. There was one representative from each school that was on the drafting committee, and those were the presidents. And they came back, and we drafted it. The university presidents did not write the appeal, as some people think. The biggest influence on the appeal was the information that ACA had presented in the second look.
Right. And who paid for the ad?
Well, now that was a real controversy, because the Atlanta Constitution wouldn't publish it. It looked like to me it cost $1,000, and somehow, I don't know who paid for that ad, but it came out in the New York Times first, and then the Atlanta papers were embarrassed because Ralph McGill was still there. He's supposed to be the big liberal. So they finally came around and published it.
And so what was the reaction on the part of your fellow students to what the presidents had laid out in terms of the approach and so forth?
Well, you know how students are. They're going to be against authority. But we had enough sense to keep it in line with what they, because we knew that, at least I did, I can't speak for none of the rest of them, but I knew that it was important for the presidents, for us not to be fighting the presidents. Now, one of the misconceptions that came out of that whole experience was that Dr. Brawley was adamantly opposed to us doing anything. That was not true. That was my president. I used to keep him posted. We would sit down here, we would talk. And he was most encouraging. He said, Ben, I understand what y'all got to do, but I got to run this school. I can't, if somebody gets hurt, then I'm responsible if I had not cautioned you. And those are the kind of things Dr. Brawley would say to me. But he would not get out on the line like Dr. Mays would, but he was very encouraging to me. I'll give you another little caveat. When by the time my second semester in college, I had 9 hours to do, only 9, because I'd gotten through with my work. So I had a lot of time. One of the professors, social science professors, who seemed to have been envious of what we were doing, put me out of his class. I missed the test. And that would have kept me from graduating. So I was just so distraught. I was hurt. And I missed the class the day that we did our march.
In May? The march?
Well, no, the March 9th.
Okay, the first sit-in. Okay.
First year.
Right, okay.
And I was distraught. I went to Dr. Brawley crying and carrying on like a 20-year-old when he's really don't know what to do. I said, I can't understand it. My grades, I had a B average going into that. It wasn't a final exam, but the man just told me I was out of his class. So Dr. Brawley got me reinstalled. I ended up getting a B out the course. But those are the little things.
Okay.
And I think he gets a bad rap from people about nobody was interested in what we were doing but Mays. That's not true. Dr. Manley, I think, was over there at Spelman. Right. And they were low-key, but they were encouraging their kids at the same time. Because we were doing something that they wanted to do but couldn't do. And Dr. Mays was just, he was above all of it because of his national and international reputation. He could say what he wanted to say. Nobody gonna bother him, parents or nobody. But Dr. Brawley was one of the quiet giants behind the Clark students.
Okay. And
he worked it through me, basically. I felt I could do anything.
What about your own parents?
Well, they were scared. They never said a mumbling word to me about it. But I know they were scared. They used to talk to other people. But they never told me don't. They never told me don't.
Okay. So then how do you spread the word to the students as a whole? Right now, up to this point, it's the Council of Government Leaders, Student Government Leaders, and so forth, the presidents, the statement, but then the sit-ins begin, and you begin to, what was sort of, again, sort of describe that that March period, March 1960.
Well, I went back to teach in 1964 at Clark, 4 years after.
Okay.
And they quit. There was still residual pride. They obviously had been reading about it. And he said, well, what are we going to do for our generation? I said, well,
4 years later.
I said, well, your generation will have something to do. But you don't just sit around and say that's, it just evolves. You don't plan it as such. I don't know what your mission is going to be outside of your work as students. And, they never came up with it. That 65 to 70 period never really had any external issues to deal with because things were moving so rapidly and, so favorably in the Atlanta context.
Well, let's talk let's go.
Let me
Okay,
put
sure.
on.
Okay, we were just talking about, I wanted to sort of take us through the months of that spring, because March is the appeal, March 9th. Then I know that you're present at the founding meeting in Raleigh of SNCC, and maybe let's get to that point next, okay?
Yeah, well, that was exciting too, coming off all that publicity, and we were pretty much the second most publicized student activity in the country, next
After
to Green.
Nashville.
Well,
Or after
Nashville
who?
did its thing, but it didn't get the publicity Atlanta
And
got.
who would you say was the first?
Greensboro.
Oh, of course, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so we were prominent, and let's see, Julian, A.D. King, Herschel, and I were the representatives from Atlanta, I think.
Okay.
And that was exciting. You know, I was just active because I had been to meetings and stuff like that, and I was easy. It was flowing easily for me, and consequently got a chance to impact greatly. Marion Barry was the chairman of that meeting.
Right.
Looked like to me Bernard Lee was there from Alabama, and it was really sponsored by Dr. King, SCLC.
Well, Ella Baker.
Well, that was Dr.
No?
King.
Okay.
That was Dr. King.
Okay.
She did it under his cloak, but I later found that out.
How?
I don't know, just reading and people, you know. I liked Miss Baker, but I was wondering why she was there. I really was. But that meeting was very exciting, and the thing that I was most proud of is that I was made chairman of the committee to come up with the name. I don't know who else has claimed that, but we were divided into subcommittees, and the name of the organization came out of my committee.
Okay.
And the big issue there was whether or not we're going to call it a student group, or whether we were going to just have a generic name, or what. And looked like to me, well, anyway, we came up with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee because my philosophy was that we need to say coordinating because we did not want, you know, by the nature of students, we did not want it to appear that we were a national organization competitive with the NAACP, the Urban League, and all those places. And if we say coordinating, that simply meant coordinating, not directing. And that was a big issue. Do we direct action or do we just coordinate information? My philosophy was that we coordinate information because you're going to have such a turnover of students unless you do more harm by taking people out of school and permanizing them in an organization. And that was not my thinking at all. So we came out with the recommendation for SNCC.
Who else was on your task force or your
I
committee?
cannot remember any of those people. I really can't.
Okay.
But,
what else? What other memories from that weekend in Raleigh?
Oh, Lord. Looked like to me there was a fellow there named Sellers, Cleve Sellers.
Sellers, right. From Orangeburg, right?
Yeah. Stanley Wise might have been there. I'm not sure. Then there was some white students. NSA was trying to get involved at that time.
Is that Connie Curry, or who is that?
I don't think Connie was there at the time.
Okay.
Connie came later. We met at All Souls in Washington shortly thereafter. And Tim Jenkins, who was the first black president of NSA, was sort of like the star. And they wanted to come in and swoop up the student room. So that was politics. Albert Brinson and I were there. I don't know whether Julia made that one or not.
And how was it determined to have SNCC's headquarters here? What was it?
That was an interesting one too. My thinking was basically that Atlanta at that time was more of a communication center than any of the towns involved. That was my assertion. And I don't know. I just don't know. More schools here, more. I just thought we were just arrogant and got it and worked it.
And a climate more generally where you could come in, you'd be a little bit freer in Atlanta.
Well, they respected Atlanta as being the leadership. I mean, that's all it was. It was a reflection on all those people we talked about: Carl Holman, Whitney Young, Atlanta. Atlanta has always had that posture in the national life of Black America.
So there wasn't necessarily rivalry or resentment, or was there?
I don't think so. Nobody really tried to get it. I think it was just the arrogance of, no, it's not a good word. It was the confidence of the Atlanta group that wanted it and thought it should be here, and we got it. I don't remember any real controversy over that.
Okay. Let's move into May then. The proposed march on the state capitol.
May.
1960. Call that.
That was in March. Was it?
Well, I thought there was a proposed march on the anniversary of the Brown decision.
Oh yeah, that was true.
And something about Chief Jenkins turning Lonnie King back.
Well, turning all of us back.
Right.
That wasn't May.
Okay.
It could have been. It could have been. I might have my dates.
Okay.
Yeah, we did have a proposed march, but I don't think that was May.
Okay.
We'll get those dates straight.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was captain of the action committee for that march. You can read about that march in the Look magazine, April 21st, 1960.
60.
So
Okay.
it couldn't have been May.
Okay. I will look it up.
Look at April. Yeah, Captain Little and I had a confrontation on the Peachtree Street and Mitchell, which is now Peachtree South. Or maybe it was Broad Street and Mitchell.
Right. Okay. What was that?
He tried to turn us around right there. And we had a little confrontation. They made a big to-do of that. They took me to jail.
Was that the first time? No, you've been
I'd been in before.
Right?
Yeah, I was there taking the leader away. But they didn't do nothing but talk and roll around in the car looking like a big shot. It was interesting. I was not afraid at all. Now I'm getting the dates a little confused in my head because I can't remember a May date. See, around May and June of that year, we were picketing stores.
Right.
We were picketing Colonial Store and.
Well, talk about the evolution of the Riches campaign.
Well, we sat down and we planned to go down and sit in at the Fulton County. Well, we did Fulton County. Now, Riches was a different one. Dr. King, let me tell you about the planning of that. That was real fun.
I want to hear that.
We met over at Spelman one day. The Central Committee met. Central Committee, that sounds communistic, doesn't it? Well, the Central Committee met at Spelman to determine whether or not we wanted Dr. King to participate in any of our activities.
As early as, okay.
Yeah, this is 60.
Right,
Summer.
fall of 60, yeah.
Oh, not even fall. We started this in
Summer, okay.
summer,
Okay.
late school year,
All right.
June maybe.
Right, okay.
And we argued. My position was yes, because it brings highlight. Lonnie was no, he would take all the publicity. That was how simple.
Even that early on,
That was a simple issue.
Okay.
And I said, we would be foolish with all the attention that Dr. King is getting. We would be foolish not to have him come sit with us. So I think Herschel was with me on this one. But anyway, our viewpoint prevailed. And then we went to Riches. Now, this is where Carolyn Long, I think she went with us.
That one, right.
In that one. And I was there, and they got, that's the one that caused him to get arrested. At the Magnolia Room.
Finally joined.
We brought him in to highlight those activities. We had strikes at the Magnolia Room. Looked like to me we went to the State Capitol restaurant. We went to the Fulton County restaurant, and somewhere out on Peachtree.
Where were you?
I was with Dr. King.
You were at the Magnolia Room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was with Dr. King. We got arrested together, along with Carolyn. I think Lonnie was there. I'm not sure. There are pictures. I got pictures of all that stuff somewhere. But that is the big event that really turned the 1960 elections. When Dr. King went to jail, I guess that was in the fall. It was in October. It was in October. Dr. King went to jail, and then the phone calls started ringing. Then it became a national news story.
So what do you know about those phone calls?
All I know is when the jail person came in there and said that the Kennedys had called the jail to release Dr. King or something. I don't know the particulars of it.
Y'all had been out, and then didn't Judge Mitchell revoke King's probation on the traffic?
Oh, when he got out of jail, they locked him up in the cab.
And then sent him to Reidsville, right?
Yeah, that all happened after the Kennedy stuff. That got to be secondary. The important thing was that when Dr. King was released from the Fulton County Jail, the publicity overwhelmed him going to Reidsville. We saw it here locally, but people didn't get that. The black folk all over the country were beginning to say, "Oh, this Kennedy man's got something going on." Completely turned that election around in every town except Atlanta.
Because of John Calhoun.
Because of John Calhoun. Yeah. So that was very interesting how that impacted.
So the word was that the Kennedys. This is a matter that I've sort of looked at it from a lot of different people's perspectives, but the word was that the Kennedys had contacted whom?
Well, my understanding that the Kennedys first called the jail, the chief honcho.
Okay.
But the story has evolved that they called Coretta. But they actually called the jail and told that man,
And how do you know that?
Well,
where did you hear?
I got it from. I know. I'm trying to remember where I got it from. I had. I tell you the truth, I don't know, but there's always been a controversy about that. It's always been a controversy. We're gonna pin that one down. I'm gonna go call Leroy Stinchcomb and see if he got that call.
Huh.
That's been
Interesting.
Yeah.
Was he?
He was the sheriff.
At that time?
He was the sheriff. And we were in the county jail, and he controls the county jail.
Right.
I tell you who would know that, Louis Slayton. You could get to Louis. Well, Louis, and I could talk too.
Right.
But let's pin that down, because that's disturbed me. Because I've told it that the jailer the authorities were called to tell they should release him, Bobby Kennedy.
Even though then he gets put back into
Well, that was a whole different jurisdiction.
DeKalb and then Reidsville.
That was a
Judge
whole
Mitchell
different. That was a whole different jurisdiction.
Okay.
But the
No,
Atlantic,
the more you get into that episode, the murkier it gets sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, just try to.
Well, I know there was a phone call made.
By Bob.
Somebody called the jail
Okay.
because the word spread in the jail.
Before you, in that first day or two, before you've been released.
That very day it happened. The word spread that the Kennedys had called the jail. And we were out the next day.
Maybe we'll finish this time with what's going on in the spring of '61 then, or, with the compromise.
Ooh.
And maybe that would be the sort of the last kind of thing we touch on today, okay, before we not even get into electoral politics, but.
Excuse me, the Look article was 61. Did I say that?
He said 60. Well,
It was 61.
Okay.
61.
April 61, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go through the fall, after the election. Sit-ins are still going on, the negotiations, the compromise, King's appearance at the Warren Street Church. Your role in that.
Oh, well, we had this negotiating team. Well, the old guard had decided they were going to negotiate this thing out.
The old guard meaning Walden,
Borders, and Cochran. They had started talking to Richardson and Hartsfield. And then we sent, Lonnie got involved. Looked like to me Lonnie and Herschel, I don't know.
Right.
But the students were outraged by the results that were coming out. No, they didn't want no kind of compromise or nothing. And we had this meeting at the little church there, the little.
Warren, is that what it's
No, it wasn't that one. I ain't talking about that meeting.
Okay.
We had a meeting at the.
Which church?
What's that little church? There on Brawley, right on the campus.
Okay.
You have to get the name of it
Yeah,
so we can
okay.
make sure. What's the name of that? Anyway, we had a meeting there.
These are students.
Students.
Right.
Oh, it was the biggest meeting we had in a long time. Because the word was that Lonnie and them had surrendered our bargaining points and what have you. They were outraged. And they wanted to dethrone Lonnie. I said, no. This is no time to change leadership. And furthermore, why do we need to change leadership? They wanted to put me in power. And I wouldn't let them. You know, I just had to do all this, what comes natural with me. Politics, passion, calm, resolve. And, okay, we got over that storm. Lonnie was still in power.
But that's making short description of something that,
was major.
well, I mean, just elaborate just a little bit about that.
Well, it's hard for me to elaborate on that because it was probably one of the most masterful times of my life. And I couldn't go back and repeat nothing I said, but everybody told me, Ben, you were masterful. What I did was to quiet down the mutiny. That was mutiny. And I was able to quiet it down and to get them to back up our leaders who were down there negotiating. I mean, there was just no time to pull away from them. We would have only confused everybody who was trying to come to some resolution of the problem. You have to get that from some other people. I don't know how they saw it. All I know is I did what I had to do, and I was comfortable doing it. And that is not to let my personal achievement get in the way of getting done what we had to do. Because I could have easily taken over the group and gone any way I wanted to go that night. That's where the fervor of the crowd was.
Okay.
But I didn't.
So you calmed the mutiny and said, let's not change leaders in the middle of the...
Yeah, the storm. You know. But anyway, you'll get the nitty-gritty of that. I can't talk about that too much other than I had a respect for Lonnie and Hershey and everybody who was negotiating for us. And I wasn't going to be a part of anybody to pull the rug out from under them. But the problem continued, although the students were quiet. So we called this big community meeting at Warren. This is the meeting where they were supposed to report on the findings of the negotiating team. It was the most magnificent crowd I've seen. They had loudspeakers outside. Somebody has to have a tape of that. You haven't found it?
I wish. That'd be
Somebody's got to have a tape of that because it was a major meeting. And nobody could quiet the crowd down. But I got up there and we brought some sense to the house again. They knew Dr. King was coming. That's what they were really excited about. I'm trying to see who it was. But anyway, people gave me credit for bringing the quiet to that. I led songs. Then Dr. King came on.
Didn't his father, didn't Daddy King?
Daddy King tried.
And what happened?
No, he couldn't do nothing. Oh, you old guard, blah, 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 this. The older people couldn't do nothing because they felt like they had sold us out. They had Lonnie right in the pack.
And then what about Martin's speech?
Martin, I thought he got over all right. If I recall correctly, he came home with reason. And that was a lot of shouting now. They wanted to shout him down, but we got him quiet.
So where did you stand in all of this sort of vis-a-vis the position that the old guard had taken and where...
Right in the middle, trying to keep quiet. Right in the middle. My life has been so consistent. If there's anything about Ben Brown, and anybody will tell you, is that I have always tried to keep a balance in my own life as well as in the environment that I find myself in. I was right in the middle of all of that. I was saying to the student, listen, we would not be able to do what we are doing had it not been for the contributions of those old guys. They paved the way. They created this situation. They elected a William V. Hartsfield who was more tolerant than Bull Connor. So let's not destroy them. They need our respect. We don't have to agree with them, but they need our respect. And I would say to the old guard, listen, y'all, please, we ain't going to do it like you did it, but give us a little room to be creative, and we will respect you for that. And we will come to some resolve that's going to be good for the community. Now, I cannot tell these students anything but that. If I go out and tell them I'm no good to you, and all to them. That's the way I approach it, straight up the middle.
And where did you get that kind of sense that that was the right way to go?
I don't know. I think it all comes from a Warren Cochran, watching them guys do things. You know, I don't know where that energy comes from, but people always say, "Ben, you're a compromiser. You're a visionary." I think it's from my spiritual being, really. I mean, you know, as some folks say, that's my karma. Something about it. I'm not. I don't know that much about the spiritual teachings and stuff, but I know what I feel, and I'm not afraid to demonstrate it or share it in my conversations based on my own understanding of me and the greater power.
When you look back at, you know, certainly you've read accounts of the events of 60 and 61, you know, what would you want to sort of correct on the record that's out there already in terms of the received historical wisdom about that or treatment about that? You know, are there things that you've read that do not jive with your own recollection? And if so, sort of, what do you recall that would be sort of a corrective to?
Well, the only thing that like I say, I'm confused about this phone call thing. I would like to go back and correct some things about me and some of the peers of the group. Some of the, and it's not about credit. It's just about getting the record straight. And I hold myself responsible for that, for not getting it straight. Most people who study civil rights don't know Ben Brown. They don't even know that Ben Brown exists. How could they go through Atlanta and not know that? I don't know. That's that's just something that I regret. And like I said, I hold myself responsible because I have not generated another perspective on it.
Okay, well, specifically, you know, in terms of, you know, your memories and your experience, what would you want to add to the record of those years, 60, 61, for now, that we haven't talked about at this point?
I wouldn't want to add anything. I mean, I take it as it is. I don't take nothing from it. I don't want to add.
I'm just saying, you know, have we missed anything? You know, what have we not got to? Where are there places where the record's been distorted, you know, and so forth?
I don't think it's a matter of being distorted. The record has not been distorted as far as I see. It just hasn't been revealed.
Okay.
You know.
Well, what more from your memories of that year, basically, from the spring of 60 to the spring of 61?
Okay, let me give you an example. We had the bus. I haven't seen anywhere about the bus station integration move, December 60.
I don't know very much about that.
We met at Herndon Stadium, got on some buses. We went to Macon, Jacksonville, Birmingham, testing the ICC ruling.
Right.
That the stations were integrated. We got arrested in Macon, and they held us, did not know what to do. This was a Sunday. There was a family down there, Hutchins. It'd be interesting for you to touch base. Hutchins Funeral Home.
I know the Randalls, but I don't know the Hutchins.
Well, you need to know the Hutchins because they were the other side of town.
Okay.
They were the one the Randalls was in the, well, both of them were in the real deal, but the Randalls had the lock on the black side.
Right.
The Hutchins had the lock on the town.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
They were in the real mix. So somebody called him, told him come down here and get these niggers. And we stayed under house arrest at the Hutchinsons until they worked out something. But Bill and Daddy would give you an interesting perspective of that.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And then there was a group that went to Alabama where they, I don't know, I think they tried to burn a bus or something down there. Looks like to me John Lewis might have been involved with that.
This isn't the Freedom Ride.
No, this was an Atlanta initiated group.
Okay.
And I haven't seen much about that written.
No, I haven't. It was sort of like, so that was sort of Atlanta initiated, sort of independent of SNCC.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Or independent of CORE, or
Sure.
independent of, you know.
Well, SNCC, I never looked at it as a initiating organization. It was a coordinating committee.
Right.
And that's the way I looked at it. Now, when Stokely and them took over, they tried to make it an initiating national group, which I thought was ill-conceived by the nature of students.
Right.
So we lost a lot of students trying to make that organization a national thing.
What about the Riches boycott? Do you remember?
Yeah, all that happened. I was away during most of that. See, I left Atlanta in '61 fall and went to Washington.
Right.
And I didn't get back until '64. The boycott had been initiated before I left,
Right.
but it didn't full bloom until I was gone.
Okay.
And you had a whole different leadership group, Charles Black and Ralph Moore and those people. And I don't know what they really did.
Okay. Okay. Well, why don't we stop for now?